Preserving the planet. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
What happened to this land I love? The one that was blessed from above, where a man could be anything he dreamed to be. People coming from everywhere, just trying to get a share of the American dream and prosperity. Papa told me you can measure a man by the things he makes with his hands. Work hard for your money and your good name. Politicians all across this land are saying, do nothing, here's a helping.
Well, good morning. It's Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. This morning we've got a program that we will be looking at a subject we looked at several weeks ago with Dr. Charles Lee, and that is with a gentleman who I recently met over the internet by the name of Nicholas Gerber. Mitchell is a Afrikaner from Johannesburg, South Africa, but he has dedicated 17 years of his life to exposing the forced organ harvesting in China. And he is on our show today to talk about this travesty, this horrible, really genocidal thing that is happening, and how it affects every one of us around the world, because this is under communism, and communism is what really is happening to much of the world. We are seeing a forced transition through globalism, through communism, to the kind of system that allows something like the forced organ harvesting that's going on in China right now. So with that, Mitchell, are you on the call, please?
Yes, Dan, I'm here.
Wonderful. I have had Dr. Harry Booyens, and also had Henry Lariche on my radio show a number of different times, talking about some of the things that are going on with the Communist Party, the ANC, and the Communist Party of South Africa. It's interesting having an Afrikaner on the radio talking about what's going on in China with Falun Gong. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the many things that you have been dealing with. I've seen your videos. I've read much of the stuff that you've been involved with, and it's obvious that you really are on top of this program. Dr. Lee was on top of this program, but nowhere nearly as much as you appear to be. So with that, would you maybe give our listeners a little bit of your background, and then let's go into the discussion.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate, Dan, for allowing me to grace your wonderful show and reach out to your listeners, especially their hearts, because what I'm about to discuss with you, ladies and gentlemen, is a new form of evil, a new form of genocide that has been coined by the investigators that I actually sat down with in London about 2 months ago at the UK Parliament, presenting the case about the forced live organ harvesting in China. And my background is in international human rights. I come from a Judeo-Christian family from South Africa, and I moved to the United States in 1995. I received my American citizenship, and now I'm on the front lines of Vietnam, working with the underground resistance movements, exposing the Chinese government even further. And not many people have heard about this, and those who have find it incredibly hard to believe. We still find it hard to believe that this is going on such a large scale, scope, and magnitude. No other government in modern history and in the past has done this to their citizens. The Nazis have done something similar, and other regimes as well in the past. But the Chinese Communist Party, and as you mentioned, Dan, communism is the evil specter that has violated and has tried to destroy the world's normal societies as we speak as well, has decimated 5,000 years of Chinese divine culture under the Chinese Communist Party since Mao Zedong took over in 1949, and over 80 to 90 million people, at least in China. That's not including the Soviet Union, Cambodia, and other places around the world. At least 80 to 90 million, more than 2 world wars combined, of people in China have lost their lives under this communist dictatorship. And with Falun Gong, the spiritual movement that took China by storm between 1992 and 1998, these 5 simple to learn free exercises that target the energy channels of the human body, unblock the energy channels, allow the blood to circulate freely, and rejuvenate the organs of the human body to such a degree that it became the life force. This particular practice, pronounced Falun Gong, became the life force of China, and between 1 out of every 12 Chinese national citizens were practicing by 1998 in China, outnumbering the number of Communist Party members by 50 million people. So the military dictator, the president of China, became very jealous and hateful that he couldn't control the hearts and the minds of at least 10%, between 70 and 100 million Falun Gong practitioners in China, and wanted to eradicate them and use them as raw materials, and has now sent them to state-mandated hospitals, cutting out their organs while alive, selling their organs as the healthiest organs in the world illegally without any consent, then burning the bodies in the boiler rooms of the hospitals, and also using the Falun Gong bodies, plasticizing and embalming them, and selling them off to the body world exhibits and exhibitions that are touring the world as we speak as well. So this is a new form of evil that I'm glad to share with you on your show, Dan, to your listeners.
Wow, this is a subject that I think everyone in America, and really everyone in the world, needs to understand. And the problem with communism is that anytime you take control and give control to a collective, it always ends up that a few people at the very top control everything, and that's certainly the case here. The reason, Mitchell, that the Falun Gong are being targeted specifically is because of both things that you talked about. The fact that they're such a large movement and that they are some of the healthiest people in the world. Tell us a little bit about about the Falun Gong, let's say the physical attributes. It's much like meditation. It is something that allows a much healthier body than a normal, just a person that's not practicing anything like this. So would you maybe describe how that whole process is making people healthier?
Absolutely. Mr. Li Hongzhi, the founder of Falun Gong, introduced this ancient traditional spiritual movement for mind, body, and spirit, very similar to Tai Chi, very similar to yoga, into the general public of communist China, mainland China, in 1992. And Falun Gong, it's pronounced Falun Gong, is an ancient Chinese spiritual discipline, ladies and gentlemen, in the Buddhist tradition. It consists of moral teachings of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, universal, whether you are Christian, whether you are Jewish, whether you are Buddhist, whether you are atheist, it doesn't matter. You can practice it. It's beautiful and really good for the body. It's a meditation as well. It has 4 gentle exercises that are truly unique and highly effective in the way to improve your health, energy levels, and vitality. I've been a Falun Gong practitioner for the last over 10 years now. I used to do a lot of martial arts, yoga, Tai Chi. I used to run a lot, swim, do gym. And what I felt with Falun Gong, what I loved about it was it's free. It's not cultish or some kind of extreme religion like the communist regime has demonized it as. It's a way of life. It's an easy-to-learn practice. It's free of charge. It doesn't interfere with your faith. It doesn't take you away from your family. It actually enhances your profitability in business because you become more of an honest person and confident in yourself. It improves your love life, your family life, and the instrumental psychological and physiological benefits that were being documented before it was outlawed in China and after it was outlawed in China in the West is unbelievable. It really shows how this innocent spiritual practice became the largest group in China. And by 1999, the People's Public Security News, the official newspaper of China's Ministry of Public Security, they praised Mr. Li for his contributions in promoting the traditional crime-fighting virtues of the Chinese people, in safeguarding social order and security, and promoting rectitude in society, for bringing this incredibly beautiful practice to the limelight. And Mr. Li has been nominated for 5 Nobel Peace Prizes and was also nominated for the European Parliament for the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought. And he's also been a recipient for the Freedom House's International Religious Freedom Award. And one more thing I might add is that even the premier Zhu Rongji at that time was very happy about how Falun Gong was improving not only the productivity rates in the factories, the suicide rates were going down, people were living longer, the pregnancies, when there was a woman that a Chinese woman I was doing research with, and she was back then she was a practitioner. I believe she was a student, a medical student, or even higher than that, I believe, doing research at Virginia Medical Institute in America. And she was researching how a woman who was pregnant with a child doing the Falun Gong exercises with a 3 to 6 to a year-month period compared to a non-practitioner, as well as the DNA changes and the metabolic processes of the cells. And she saw incredible results, how through practicing you really improve your body. And by 1999, the Chinese officials also went so far as to quantify Falun Gong's benefits, such as when one official from China's National Sports Commission, speaking with U.S. News and World Report, they declared that Falun Gong can save each person 1,000 yuan in annual medical fees. So if 100 million people are practicing it, that's 100 billion yuan saved per year in medical fees. I mean, that's just incredible amount of money that has been saved by practicing this. So it became the life force and the most popular practice before that real dark and evil day of July 20th, 1999, when it was completely, brutally outlawed and persecuted to this day.
Well, Mitchell, one of the things that stands out in the conversation and something that you pointed out is the fact that this is not a religion, it's a way of life, and in fact it enhances and works very well with Christianity or I guess probably any of the other major religions, at least the peaceful ones, because it is a way of life that emphasizes physical health, mental well-being, mental health, peace, genuine, let's say, moral decency, and many of the things that we all believe in, or certainly a large number of us believe in. And it's just part of a way of life rather than a religion.
Absolutely. You nailed it, Dan. Absolutely. And people, I know that I stopped drinking and smoking when I practiced this. My lungs become healthier. I could sleep better at night. I breathe better. I have much more of a positive, uplifting spirit when I have practiced Falun Gong. The philosophy is basically three universal principles found in Christianity, in Judaism, in Protestantism, in Taoism, Buddhism: truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. And through practicing and raising your moral character, whether you are in business, whether you are in family, whether you are in love, wherever you are in the community, and practicing the Falun Gong exercises, the body, the mind, and the spirit become incredibly healthy. And so you would see all different kinds of people, from cancer patients. I mean, I even had tests, Dan and ladies and gentlemen, on the cancer patients, terminal ill cancer patients, how Falun Gong helped with the symptoms, reducing the symptoms. Some of them even were cured by this, by the exercises, from tuberculosis to hepatitis to leukemia. We've even done studies on autism and how it helps the children with autism function even better than after being damaged by the vaccines that they were given. And it just goes to show how this practice, which is free of charge, the books are all downloaded for free, the exercises are all taught for free all throughout the world in 114 different countries. Anyone can learn it. Any walk of life can learn it. As long as you have a human body, you can learn it. And it's wonderful. And I have never been so happier and so healthier in my life compared to what I was before I started to practice. Hello, Dan, are you there?
Mitchell, that's a great discussion to lead into what we were going to talk about today, and that is how the communist government in China is now using these healthy, happy, intelligent people who may not agree with the communist way because it so fundamentally violates every concept of freedom, every concept of individualism. And so they picture the Falun Gong as a enemy of the communist state, and as such, they are specifically targeting, and what I want to get into is just exactly how diabolical this whole plan is by the Chinese government to try to really destroy and at the same time take advantage of the physical strength and the well-being of the Falun Gong. So with that, let's talk about some of the things that have been happening, how this whole program got started by the communists and how it has escalated into a wholesale organ harvesting program against political enemies of the communist state.
Absolutely. Great to be on your show, Dan. I mean, I am so grateful that I can actually come on your show because you are one of the very few that have allowed me and like Dr. Charles Lee and others to come and grace this truth about what is going on. And when the world really wakes up to what is going on and really comes to realize that this is going on, this is not being, this is not smoke and mirrors, this is not some back alley organ harvesting in India or in Southeast Asia where I am, but this is actual industrialized, institutionalized, harvesting people alive in hospitals, making and forcing doctors to become murderers, and this is on the highest level of government that has been going on for 19 years, people are going to be shocked. And what I did was I selected a couple of MP3 sound bites because I felt that it would be important for your listeners not only to take my word for this, but to actually listen into the investigators. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit about why the communist regime has done what they've done, and then I wanted to share with you a soundbite by the investigators who I actually sat down with in London to give your listeners an account, and I think it will be very captivating and insightful for them to listen to it, if I may.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is very important.
Okay. Well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, and Dan, to understand how organ harvesting could happen in China, it's crucial to understand that there's no limit to how far the Chinese Communist Party will go to wipe out something or someone. China, the Chinese government, and the Chinese people have been hijacked by the reign of terror, which is a demonic specter, the evil gangster regime called the Chinese Communist Party for the last 50-plus years. And when the persecution started in July 1999, the Chinese regime called Falun Gong the biggest threat to national security since the Tiananmen Square massacre 10 years before. And today they are even more terrified because official Communist Party documents, which we recently obtained, stated that the competition against Falun Gong is the principal means of competition for the hearts and the minds of the masses. Now, many people know this dictator, President Xi, who is also aiding and abetting the forced organ harvesting. He knows full well about it. He hasn't done anything. Hu Jintao also didn't do anything about it. But not many people know the former leader of the Chinese Communist Party before these two gentlemen, before these two presidents. And this was Jiang Zemin. And when the persecution began, he was seeking a way to consolidate his own power, ladies and gentlemen, while also eliminating the largest movement, namely the Falun Gong, thought in recent Chinese history. So he had to achieve his goals somehow. And he needed to do this by one thing and one thing alone: hate, demonizing Falun Gong, creating a weaponized propaganda machine to demonize Falun Gong, call them cult members, call them sinister terrorist organizers, a sinister cult that kill themselves and burn themselves. They even staged, the communist regime even staged a movie-like self-immolation in Tiananmen Square, where they shut everything down and they made 4 people with a little girl set themselves on fire and claim that this is what Falun Gong do. And this severely poisoned the Chinese people's minds and turned public opinion against Falun Gong in order for them to get the confirmation to do the most vile thing that is happening in this world today, which is to kill the Falun Gong for their organs and sell them as the healthiest organs in the world. So hopefully this will come through, Dan. I think it will, but I would love to share with you about how Ethan Gutmann, David Kilgour, and David Mattis, the 3 investigators.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Yes. If you can play that, terrific.
Okay, absolutely. I have a couple of clips for your audience. I think they'll find it very impactful and insightful. But this is the first clip from the BBC radio as early as 2013. Now, this has been going on since 2006, when the confirmation of the allegations were confirmed by David Kilgour, the former Secretary of State to the Asian Affairs of the Canadian Parliament, and David Mattis, who is an international human rights lawyer from Winnipeg, Canada. And these 2 gentlemen confirmed the allegations that between 40 and 65,000 Falun Gong practitioners in the period between 2001 and 2006 were harvested alive for their organs. The number has been much bigger than that since 2016, when they updated their reports with over 2,000 footnotes in their new update called The Slaughter, when Ethan Gutmann, after 8 years of investigation into the harvesting of the organs of the Falun Gong, joined the coalition. So here is Ethan Gutmann and David Kilgour on the BBC on 2013.
We talk a rather upsetting issue, allegations that have repeatedly been aired, that China plays a part in harvesting organs, mainly of executed prisoners. The numbers run to thousands every year. The organs then get sold on for transplants. It's always been vehemently denied by the Chinese government. But here in Britain, representatives of a campaign called Forced Organ Harvesting have been looking at the issue, and they've gone as far as presenting their latest findings to the British Parliament. Two representatives join us here in the studio. Welcome to David Kilgour, former member of the Canadian Parliament, and Ethan Gutmann, author of several books on China, who've both been involved in the investigations. They're here to tell us a little bit more. David Kilgour, if I could start with you, what are the latest findings of your investigation? What are you closing in on?
That about 65,000 Falun Gong practitioners have been killed and their organs trafficked. There are other people too, convicted prisoners are killed, of course, but the thing that we're focusing on is the Falun Gong community. My colleague Ethan Gutmann has done a lot of work on the Uyghur community. He'll probably want to say something about that. But yeah, there is no doubt. We have 52 kinds of evidence that this is happening. To give it the easiest example, the wife of a surgeon told us that her husband had removed the corneas from 2,000 Falun Gong practitioners in a 2-year period. So, I mean, there's absolutely no doubt in any place. We've got 2 books on it. We've got all kinds of.
And these, just to clarify, these come after judicial executions?
No, there is no judicial involvement in virtually all of the Falun Gong. That's the thing that nobody understands.
Okay, right. So we better clarify this, because we often cover the fact that China, of course, has one of the highest rates of execution, judicial execution. It's their choice. That's what they do. And they're always there in the top 3, along with Saudi Arabia and Iran. But this is something different.
Exactly. It's because of police signatures, all you need to get sent to a forced labor camp. And then basically what happens is somebody from, it could be London, it could be Canada, goes over there for a liver. And there's a computer bank, and it says there's a match for you out in camp number 50, and somebody's dragged out of camp number 50 into an operating room. Their liver's taken out of them. It's flown to Shanghai, where you're probably waiting for your liver, and you come back to London with a new liver, and somebody has been killed like a lobster in a grotesque restaurant.
Hang on a minute. So you're not even saying, because, I mean, it's one issue, the judicial executions and the use of the cadaver, which I suppose in a certain legal sense is the property of the state, once the state has killed the individual. But you're saying these are people being killed to order.
Precisely. And it's so, as you say, your horror shows how distressing it is. But yet it never gets mentioned. That these are people who've been maybe giving out pamphlets asking them to stop killing Falun Gong, and they're guilty of nothing.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots and Apple. And today we have Nicholas Gerber on the call. Mitchell is from Johannesburg, South Africa, and is talking to us about the persecution of the Falun Gong in China, in communist China. And it's really an indictment of the whole communist system, because communism tended to control people. There's no question about it. And this is an important statement to our listeners and to the American people, that we need to wake up to the reality that communism is not benign. It is incredibly activist, and it's activist in a way that destroys everything that we hold dear. The United States of America, we believe, our founding fathers believed in the rights of the individual, and that's why we're a republic, not a democracy. And it's always fascinating to me that the people who come here from other countries around the world, like Mitchell, recognize the special place in the world that we occupy as a republic founded on individual liberties. And because of that, they also recognize just exactly how bad so many of the other systems are. Mitchell, before we get back into the conversation, I want to remind our listeners how important it is that you please support this radio network with your financial support. Support our advertisers, it's important that they are supported as well. And I also want to remind our listeners that Debbie Boscalupi has got her Radioactive Wednesday program coming on tomorrow morning, same time, and she is going to be talking about private property rights, and that's going to be a great program as well. So with that, Mitchell, I'm sorry we had to stop you partway through your clip. You know how paying the bills is an important part of our function as well. But could you go ahead and start that clip where we had to abbreviate it, because that's incredibly important information.
Sure. Was it coming in loud and clear, Dan? Was it clear?
Oh, absolutely. It came in great. I was really impressed. We were ready on our side to run those same files, but they sound so good from you doing it that I think go ahead and continue.
Wonderful. This is from the Vice President of the European Parliament, Edward Macmillan Scott, and I think his testimony at the European Parliament is very striking as well and incredibly precise and powerful. So allow me to share what he has to say. Here we go.
Edward Macmillan Scott. Thank you very much indeed, Peter. I wrote a report on EU-China relations in 1996-7 for the Foreign Affairs Committee and returned to Beijing in 2006, where I met ex-prisoners of conscience, Falun Gong practitioners, as well as made contact with a number of other dissidents and reformers. All the Chinese with whom I had contact were then imprisoned, and in some cases, like Gao Zhisheng, tortured. Gao Zhisheng is a Christian human rights lawyer, very, very well known in China, who investigated the persecution of Falun Gong and wrote reports about it. And one of the people I met, Cao Dong, who'd been in prison, told me the story about how his best friend had disappeared one evening from the cell in their prison. And the next time he saw him, it was his body in the prison hospital with holes where body parts had been extracted. The belief that I have, and I share with David Kilgour, that organ harvesting is widespread in China, and it is restricted almost exclusively to Falun Gong practitioners. The only prisoners in China who are routinely blood tested and blood pressure tested are Falun Gong practitioners. The organ transplant industry is in the hands of the military. The People's Liberation Army is responsible for the hospitals, the transportation of body parts, and the sale of them. It is therefore a governmental activity and constitutes genocide under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. It is as serious as that. And my final word is, with respect to you, Peter, the Falun Gong after the Chinese regime of today, what the Jews were to the Nazis during the war. And we should all take note of this and look at China with new eyes. The European Parliament comes from a very diverse background, and as Peter has already said, even within this quite straightforward resolution, there are still problems, because the absolute deluge of propaganda from the regime in Beijing, vilifying Falun Gong as some sort of extremist cult. I've met, as I said, hundreds of members of Falun Gong. It is not a sect, it is not a cult, there is no money involved, there is no brainwashing, all the normal characteristics of a cult simply don't exist. These are people who practice their spiritual exercises on their own, and yet, as I said, because between 70 and 100 million people in 1999 were practicing Falun Gong, this was seen by Jiang Zemin, then the leader of the Communist Party, as a threat to his own position. It wasn't, of course, but he saw the opportunity of creating an enemy within. Just as during the war, the Nazis singled out the Jews as a special characteristic and did what they did to the Jews. The same is happening today to Falun Gong in China. That is why it is genocide. That's why I say it's so serious.
And that was Edward Macmillan Scott in the European Parliament, addressing the Parliament.
Well, obviously, this is a well-documented travesty that's going on to this day. In fact, I think it's probably worse today than it was even in the past. Is there an estimate of actually, as of fairly recently, how many Falun Gong have been harvested for their organs over the last 20 years?
That's a great question, Dan. Well, I have to be careful about this because after sitting down with and working closely with the investigators, they don't want to release the estimates quite right now because they don't exactly know how many, because it's very difficult to find out exactly the exact number. But they wanted to they wanted me to share with everybody that I come on the shows with at least 100,000, between 60 and 100,000 transplants a year. And this has been going on for the last 19 plus years. When Falun Gong started, the persecution against Falun Gong started in 1999. Right after that, we saw a huge increase in the Laogao system, which is the labor camp system in China. The labor camps just mushroomed. I mean, it was a booming industry of labor camp systems holding at least 3 million Falun Gong practitioners. And at least 20 to 25% of those practitioners at that time were getting their organs harvested. And according to David Mattis, whose testimony at the Scottish Parliament, which I would like to share with you and your listeners as well in a moment, he gives you a very good depiction of the evidential entities that go into actually understanding how this is going on, and that this cannot be refuted. And unfortunately, what has gone on recently is that Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, DAFOH.org, they have withdrawn a petition of over 3 million signatures to the United Nations, and they have withdrawn it for a purpose to show the world that even though this has been going on for 19 years, and even though 3 million people have signed in support of stopping this, or at least raising awareness about this, the United Nations has remained silent. And it's obvious because of the communist regime sitting on the United Nations Security Council and vetoing, as well as the World Health Organization. The former Deputy Minister of Health, a perpetrator in targeting Falun Gong practitioners and killing them for their organs, has now made it onto the council, the board of directors of the World Health Organization, and has influenced the World Health Organization's members to refute the evidence presented by David Kilgour, David Mattis, and Ethan Gutmann. So this is shocking, ladies and gentlemen. This is to have a perpetrator from the Chinese Communist Party. Think about this: sitting on the board of the World Health Organization, refuting claims, or not even claims, evidence that this is going on, when he is in fact complicit in being a perpetrator in killing Falun Gong for their organs. It's insane.
Yeah,
this is the world we live in.
Absolutely amazing. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, anyway, Dan, I would love to, if I may, I don't know how much time we have left, but I would love to share with you about David Mattis. I've got 2 more clips, one David Mattis and one from Miss World, Anastasia Lin, 2015 and 2016, who practices Falun Gong as well. And she goes around the world with her crown, an incredibly beautiful 25-year-old woman, empowering people with her elegance. I mean, almost like a modern-day Audrey Hepburn. And just an incredible woman. I would love to share both sound bites. But may I start? Will we have enough time for David Mattis before break?
Oh, absolutely. You've got about 12 minutes before break.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, here, ladies and gentlemen, here is David Mattis, the Nobel Peace Prize nominee, and a very, very humble man. He doesn't really talk much. If you saw him actually in interview, if you type in David Mattis, D-A-V-I-D, his last name is M-A-T-A-S on YouTube. you'll see how humble a man he is. He was a Nazi hunter. He went after the Nazis, anyone that was hiding in other countries around the world, still to this day. And he has been an international human rights lawyer for 35 years and was a nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize. Here he is talking about the Falun Gong organ harvesting in the Scottish Parliament.
You wrote a report in July 2006, a second version January 2007, a third version in book form under the title Bloody Harvest, November 2009, a book, a collection of essays that came out in August 2012. So there's a lot of material. The two reports are posted on the internet, and the books are available through, it can be purchased. And obviously in a few minutes, it's impossible to sort of give you the wealth of detail that supports the conclusions. But let me just say a few things about that. One is the telephone calls. We had callers calling into China, investigators, pretending to be relatives of patients needing transplants, and asking the hospitals if they had organs of Falun Gong practitioners for sale. And we got admission throughout China, yes, we do. The reason the callers indicated they were calling was that Falun Gong is a set of exercises, the practitioners are healthy, their organs are going to be healthy, and the callers were pretending to be relatives of patients that needed these organs. So we got admission throughout China, taped, transcribed, translated, saying, yes, Falun Gong organs for sale. Now, the Chinese government did a documentary responding to our report, and in that report, they interviewed a couple of people that we called. One of them was Liu Guoping. So they present Liu Guoping a transcript of the call, and he says, yes, I got the call, and yes, I said most of these things, but the stuff here and there about Falun Gong, I didn't say, accusing us basically of fiddling with the transcript. But there's no acknowledgement that we have him on tape, and no explanation of how we possibly could have interwoven seamlessly what he, in his own voice, what he denies having said and what he admits having said. Yet for the Chinese people, all they would see is this propaganda documentary, and certainly not our report or our website, which is lost in China. So that's one piece of evidence. A second piece of evidence is blood testing. We found that Falun Gong practitioners who got out of prison and out of China told us systematically they were blood tested and organ examined, and it wasn't for their health because they were being tortured, but it is necessary for organ transplants because you need blood type compatibility and ideally tissue type compatibility as well. The people who got out of prison who were not Falun Gong practitioners told us the same thing, that the people they saw in prison who were Falun Gong practitioners were going through these tests, and they were not. And we found this. We found practitioners around the world telling us this, and it wasn't the matter that was of immediate concern or interest to them because they weren't harmed by the blood testing. In fact, what they wanted to talk about was the torture, and it took a while to sort of find out from each of them by talking to them that this was systematically happening. And of course, these people didn't know each other, hadn't talked to each other, and yet we found this pretty regularly everywhere. And so that's a second factor. A third factor is the numbers. China, in terms of transplant volumes, is number one in the world after the United States. Waiting times are very short, whereas everywhere else they're very long. And China, until this year, didn't have a donation system. Where are the organs coming from? Well, the Chinese government says prisoners sentenced to death. Well, what's the death penalty numbers? They won't tell you. We do know that they've been going down over time because they've changed the procedures to centralize death penalty from regional court to Supreme Court. They've cut down the number of death penalty offenses, but transplant volumes have remained constant. There's no national organ donation system. There's a huge amount of hepatitis in the prison system, which makes a lot of the organs unusable. And we estimate that in order to supply 10,000 organs a year, there'd have to be death penalty volumes of about 50,000 a year. And the highest estimates of death penalty volumes in in China are about a tenth of that. So there is no explanation other than one we've come up with, the Falun Gong prisoners. The Falun Gong prisoners, they represent a huge population within the Chinese system, in the hundreds of thousands. They don't self-identify to protect their immediate family, which means that the relatives don't know where they are, and the jailers don't know who they are, so they're extremely vulnerable. They are subject to extreme vilification through hate propaganda, which means that they're depersonalized and dehumanized and marginalized. So we have this very vulnerable population. The last factor I'll mention here, although there's much more one should get into, but it's relevant to the jurisdiction of the Scottish Parliament, is that as we look around the world and in China about the precautions that should be put in place to prevent this abuse from happening, they're not there, neither in China nor elsewhere. We don't have, in China, obviously, one can see that if one knows the system in China, we don't have the rule of law. When we started, the law itself didn't require consent from prisoners for sourcing from organs. They did change that, but there's no way of enforcing that. There's no traceability. There's no records. There's no access to records, and so there's no way of determining whether there's consent, even if they assert there's consent. So we don't have the system in place in China to prevent it. We don't have a system in place abroad to prevent transplant tourists from going into China and participating in organ transplant abuse. There are some legislative proposals in some countries to deal with it. Israel enacted a law to that effect. And it's something the Scottish Parliament could do. Health is a devolved domain. It's not a reserved domain. The Scottish Parliament, in its devolved domain, can enact extraterritorial legislation, and it's done so for female genital mutilation. So it already has legislation about organ transplant abuse called the Human Tissues Scotland Act, which it could simply amend to encompass foreign transplant abuse. And it would send a message. It would be an example. It would help to establish a network to prevent this sort of abuse.
So that was David Matters, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad I got to share with you.
Well, one of the things that I want to point out is, you said earlier, but the fact is that the UN, we talked about this last week, John McManus and staff, but the UN was organized at a conference back organization, and many of the American participants in that conference created the UN Charter, and the UN were agents of Stalin. They were agents of the communist system. So we have in place this huge international organization that should be, in fact, livid about the genocide that's going on, and in fact they do everything in their power to make sure that the information is not available, and they do absolutely nothing. And they do absolutely nothing because many communists and socialists control much of the infrastructure of the UN. Mitchell, let's talk about how that works, and then we'll take our break.
Sure. I have a lot to say. I have a lot to share with you. After 17 years, you get to see how people decide what side of the line or what side of destiny they want to stand on, and it's very, very disheartening to see how these governing bodies are acting and will take a profit over human extinction, economic and political gain over human atrocity, and will aid and abet the communist regime. It's very shocking. Even to me, after 17 years, it's still very shocking. That's why, Dan, I take my hat off to you, sir, and your listeners for listening, and your producers and your sound engineering and your radio show, because you guys are a blessing. You guys are a godsend, and you guys are so courageous. And God bless you, Dan, for allowing me to come on your show. Truly, I mean that with all my heart.
Well, I mean, this is the information that we need to get out to the world, and believe me, this is nothing on my part as being any sort of a hero or anything in doing this. It's just the reality of the world we live in, and the fact that we're losing all these freedoms. And this is the sort of thing that happens when a communist dictatorship controls a large number of people. And really, under the UN, this is what they have planned for the whole world. World government will look much like what is going on in China. In fact, some of the big foundations in the United States that have been supporting world government have even stated that the communist model is the model for the world. So that's a pretty scary proposition.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more. And actually, the radical left in the United States has been using the play-by-play book from the Communist Manifesto, the Chinese Communist Party. You can see the political correctness, the social justice warrior, the Antifa terrorist group, the forced mandating of this, the outright saying on the left, democratic socialism. Now, socialism is the beginning of evil communism. That is it in its entirety. And these people would dare to actually spit from their mouths that they are running and appreciate and are standing behind democratic socialism. I mean, this is the death of America, the offensiveness, the common core. It's shocking.
All of it.
So,
Mitchell, I hear our break coming in. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let's pick that conversation up on the other side of the break.
Sure.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Serving the planet. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
And I guess today, you said 1996. Tells me a great deal because I know a lot of Africans for the last number of years, and you've experienced in South Africa the same kind of transition to a very despotic system there as well. And so I know that's a subject for another day, but you recognize totalitarian government for what it is, and that is a very evil thing. And this, your report on the Falun Gong is really important for Americans to understand, because under communism, this is the only way, under communism or socialism, the only way that something like this can happen. And you were mentioning before the break that many of the political correctness, the Antifa, and many of the things that are going on in the United States today have all the trappings of communism. And I couldn't agree more, because we're seeing a really strong push to adopt many of the same things that have destroyed much of the rest of the world. And so it's important that people understand with your talk how awful, how evil communism is, allow something like this organ harvesting program to exist. So I want to give you as much of the floor as I can. Take this wherever you need to take it. And we've got 25 minutes before the break. So if you want to play any additional clips, please feel free to do so.
Yes, absolutely, Dan. First of all, I would love to play, it's actually a video, but I converted it into an MP3 style, and it's very touching and moving with the music. I would love to share Anastasia Lin's account. It's called Project Witness, and she shares about how communism is so evil, how she grew up in China, and I would love to share it with your audience. I think it's very touching and very moving. But before I do, I would love to share as well a publication for your avid listeners who love to read and really want to learn about the social, political, and economic spectrums behind the red wall of communist China. Also, how evil communism is, and the specter that has destroyed 5,000 years of Chinese culture, wiped out more life than 2 world wars combined, has decimated many other countries. I mean, in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, now in America with the cultural Marxists on the left. And this publication was published in 2004 by the Epoch Times International in New York City. A group of anonymous Chinese, very high-ranking and famous and intellectual, got together, wrote the 9 commentaries, and published them. And this book has led to the dismantlement of the communist regime, where over 300 million Chinese people have rallied against the communist regime. And this book is called The 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party, and it can be downloaded for free. It's a free publication at www.9commentaries.com, www.9commentaries.com, or you can watch it on YouTube, called The 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party. And if I may, Dan, I would love to share with you, with Anastasia Lin, what she talks about with communist China and her growing up there. I think it's very moving and touching tale.
Absolutely.
Okay. This is the Witness Project. Anastasia Lin, Miss World 2015 and 16. He was actually banned from participating in the Miss World 2017 because she practices Falun Gong, and she is an advocate of human rights and Falun Gong rights, exposing the persecution against them, as well as other groups in China.
I was born right after the Tiananmen Square massacre. I had to learn from Western media what happened to those courageous Chinese people who were killed that day, June 4th, 1989. That really shocked me. It has never existed in our generation's memory. I had a shift in my worldview and had the courage to doubt what I had been learning my entire life. It's a profound embarrassment to learn that your entire belief system was based on a huge lie. My name is Anastasia Lin. My Chinese name is Lin Yefan. I am a working actress, and I am Miss World Canada 2015 and 16. I entered the beauty pageant because I wanted to speak up for those people.
Anastasia Lin is an advocate for human rights in China. Anastasia Lin.
Lin is an outspoken critic of China's human rights record. I feel like I'm just putting one foot in front of another. I never look at myself like a human rights activist. Chinese people and Western people live in 2 different worlds. I consider myself to be Canadian. And also I grew up in a Chinese environment. Chinese people consider I'm Chinese. I'm stuck in the middle. There's a lot of things in my childhood that I still cannot really understand. We were taught songs that had lyrics about how the Communist Party is closer to you than your own mother. The Communist Party is always glorious, righteous, and great. Always believe the party is good for you. Educate ourselves. Denounce our enemies. You should always strive for being aligned. I was elected as a student leader, and I taught to discourage their private personalities to make their whole being assimilate to the communist ideology. I became an agent for the state to persecute my fellow Chinese. Report to teacher, whoever is not in line. And I didn't know better. I wouldn't have done that if I know the truth. And they're still doing it today. My mother wanted to bring me out of China because of that. Because she thinks that that environment cannot be healthy for a child. And she wanted me to grow up in a society that has dignity and be free to be who I am. My parents got divorced, and my mom brought me to Canada. The change that I experienced didn't happen overnight. It happened over a course of quite a few years. A lifetime of indoctrination is not easy to shed. The Communist Party wants absolute control of the hearts and minds of Chinese people. After I came to Canada, I learned the Chinese Communist Party has a few buttons that people can push. The Tibetans, the Uyghurs, the Falun Gong, House Christians, Taiwan, and Tiananmen Square. I went online and searched all those topics. I was most shocked when I watched the video of Tiananmen Massacre. Chinese people tried. Everybody came together. In my 13 years of experience in China, I've never really seen Chinese people willing to risk their lives for other people. But on that day, they were rescuing the students with bullets flying around them. It gave me a new understanding, new appreciation for my countrymen. I knew that I had to go to the Miss World competition. Why a beauty pageant? I thought that's a great way to raise awareness.
The spirit of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and all mankind. And that is why I'm fighting for what I think is right.
Chinese people are not living happily and freely like they should be. And that's why they're scared of me going to China.
Anastasia Lin speaks out from beauty pageant. Canada's entrant in the Miss World contest stopped from entering mainland China.
I'm not welcome to the country anymore. Ask the Chinese government, why is it afraid to let in a beauty queen? They don't want me to go there and encourage Chinese people to speak up. They don't want me to go there to offer them hope. They don't want me to go there and then the Chinese people can look at their daughter on the screen and say, perhaps we can be less afraid because she is not. For communists, that's a terrible thing. When you speak your mind, the Communist Party is going to go after you. They will always use your family member as leverage to silence you. My father was threatened in China by the state security force. I got a message from my dad saying I should stop talking about human rights, or my family's going to face consequences. He was very scared, and I felt very vulnerable. My father didn't speak to me for a very long time. At one point, I thought he was not proud of me anymore. And then he sent me this key as a gift. The key means that they cannot destroy a father's love for a daughter. The care we have for each other, no matter how hard they try. I spoke the truth. In the past 6 decades, Chinese communists tried very hard to insert fear, hate in Chinese people's mind and heart. They made us hate each other. They made us fight each other, different social class to fight each other, destroy our traditional culture. But there's a truth that they cannot take away. And I know that it's in the Chinese people's heart. And one day they will discover it. They will confront the crimes of the Communist Party.
And that was Anastasia Lin about communism and how it ruined her childhood and brainwashed and indoctrinated her until she came out. Thank God for her mother. And she goes around the world. She's an empowering woman, amazing woman.
You know, it's to me, it's really difficult for me to understand why average Americans have so little understanding of value and the wonderful free system of government that was given to us by our founders, and are so willing to align themselves with this collectivist thinking, because it always ends up in the same place. Mitchell, it always ends up in a system that is being controlled by someone else and ruins the rights of the individuals. And I think that certainly with this discussion of the Falun Gong certainly gives us a good understanding of how that can ultimately end up. Tell us a little bit more about the depth of the depravity that's going on in the communist prison system today.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I'm glad that you shared with me about that, because I wanted to share with you with Ethan Gutmann. And Ethan Gutmann is an investigative award-winning journalist and also a nominee of the Nobel Peace Prize of 2018. And he was interviewed, he was interviewed in 2015 about what he had seen and what he is doing with organ harvesting and in terms of exposing it. And he works closely with David Kilgour and David Mattis, the two Esquires which I played before for you. And I met Ethan Gutmann in London about 2 months ago. I was doing a presentation and briefing to the UK Parliament at Westminster Abbey about the organ harvesting. And he was interviewed basically, and I'll play the clip directly afterwards if we still have time. He was interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, "What changed your mind?" He said, "What was your reaction when you heard of the reports of organ harvesting?" Skeptical. I'm always skeptical when I'm on the threshold of a new investigation. What changed your mind, Ethan? The Kilgour Mattis report. That was the report done by David Kilgour and David Mattis. And actually, ladies and gentlemen, this is free of charge. You can go and Google it. Kilgour Mattis reports. He also went on to say, Ethan, the phone calls into Chinese hospitals by Falun Gong investigators that David Mattis mentioned at the Scottish Parliament. But there is no substitute for personally cross-examining witnesses. One of my first subjects was a peasant woman, a Falun Gong practitioner, who had done serious time in a labor camp. Along with the detailed accounts of torture, she briefly mentioned a physical exam. Yet under intense questioning, the exam sounded like it was administered in a hospital turned upside down. The only possible medical rationale was to assess whether she could be exploited for her kidneys, her liver, her corneas, and perhaps her heart, the retail organs. Meanwhile, the woman was becoming increasingly annoyed with me. I mean, she had been tortured for God's sake. Her beliefs had been jeered and mocked, her family ruined. Why was this stupid white guy so interested in blood tests? She did not recognize the physical examination as having any importance. Of course, to me, this was investigative catnip. So I just want to share with you, if I may, I don't know how much time we have left, Dan, before we go to break, but Ethan Gutmann's testimony.
Yeah, no, you've got about 10 minutes, so we should be fine.
Okay, wonderful. Here we go.
Basically, you don't have to worry about the quality of these organs because they're Falun Gong. These are people, they don't drink, they don't smoke, they practice very healthy Qigong. Everybody knows the Falun Gong are arrested with they often aren't arrested at all. They just simply disappear. They were taken in. Everybody knows they're being tortured. I mean, this is not a secret in Taiwan. This was an appalling thing, a terrible thing that he walked into here. He did something about it. He created a form, an electronic form, on his computer, put a lot of work into this, which Chinese doctors would have to use, which would identify where every organ came from. He said this would only take care of 95% of this problem. He wasn't referring to criminals being harvested. He was referring to Falun Gong being harvested. He was basically saying this would shame mainland doctors. This would give a sense of transparency to the process. This would make them accountable. There's no other reason that he created this form. In a sense, he was trying to do what the Transplantation Society tried to do only over the last 2 years, was to bring accountability into the system, and he was trying to do this alone. This is not a figment of our imagination, and we both understood exactly what we were talking about. I played with that form. I moved up and down it. I cursored around all over his computer. My researcher did too. I describe him as a man of singular courage because this was an act of courage. It was a profoundly dangerous act. In fact, he told me that he was banned from the mainland. Let's go to 2013. I'm getting closer with my book. And at one point, I wanted to put out an article. And I wrote up a text of what I remembered of our interview. It's called The Tale of Two Surgeons. I sent this text to my researcher, Li Shai. Li Shai added on a little note to Dr. Ko. Under the circumstances that we don't mention your name, specific situations, or any details, is it okay to write this content? Number one. Number two, is his draft of the story below, and it's below, according to reality? Is it factual? Because at the time, we didn't record, and we didn't ask too much about this direction. So there are some situations we're not too clear about. We just remember the general drift. Could you take a look and tell us where the story is inaccuracies? If it's incorrect, how should it be correctly stated? So Dr. Ko's answer is right above it. The story seems okay. I defy anyone to find significant differences in what's being published here. Then in January 2014, the request to identify Dr. Ko by his real name was granted by Dr. Ko. Again, there's a long explanation. We wanted to ask if you're willing to give us permission to use your name when mentioning the things you told us. In the past, we just referred to you as an anonymous Taiwan doctor, but it is much more credible with the name. This will help the evidence. You would be doing a great service. Maybe even help save some people's lives. What is his answer? Okay, for what I say, I can be responsible. We asked him for a headshot for the book, and my best wishes to you. This is Dr. Ko's response to the pictures for the book. Now, any time in any of these three responses, he could have come back and said, just hang on a minute. No, he did not. And actually, I don't think that speaks badly about his character. I think that speaks well of his character. I think he's actually a very honest man. The truth that he signed off on was in this book. The way the interview was done was in this book. They didn't want to look at the book. The book was just a prop. And that offends me because it is not supposed to be a prop. This is actually supposed to be a book that people read. I understand that there are language differences and all the rest of it. And I understand that reporters are stressed and there's a 24-hour news cycle and all that stuff. But the truth is, this is their responsibility, is to get it right. They didn't do their homework here. I was asked for a statement by the Taiwan Central News Agency. That was basically the equivalent of AP over here. I put together a one-paragraph statement, had it translated into the most brilliant Chinese, and said, if you run this, you run it as an exclusive, you run it in full, you run it with my Chinese translation. They said, oh, yes, we'll do all that. And then I waited, and they didn't run it. So, and I have emails to prove that too. You know, the bottom line here is that they weren't looking for anything like this. They were looking for a soundbite. They were looking for a knife to throw. Or they were looking, reporters, as reporters will do, is just like you and Dr. Ko, fight. That's what they wanted. But I do not want to fight. This is a witness I respect. He's a man I respect. What I want is the truth. And we have a saying in English, truth is the first casualty of war.
So that was Ethan Gutmann interviewing Dr. Ko, who was a witness, a very profound and famous doctor in Taiwan, and now is the mayor in Taiwan, that came forward. And as you heard Ethan talk about him, he was prolific in exposing this organ harvesting, as well as another doctor, Dr. Invitotti, who also sat down with me and Ethan, Mr. Gutmann, and David Kilgour, as you heard before, in London. And Dr. Invitotti, since 1995, he was actually forced by the Chinese Communist regime, an upcoming surgeon, to do a forced organ harvesting on a Uyghur Muslim, a group who has also been persecuted, and Ethan works very closely with investigating their plight and brutal persecution, whose leader is a woman. And she goes around the world. She's a very successful businesswoman. She goes around and she also protests for their safety and for their freedom under the communist regime. But yes, Dr. Invitotti vividly shared with us his eyewitness account. I mean, he literally was forced by the communist regime to do a live organ harvesting right there and then. And he actually fled China, gave up everything, and now is a bus driver in London. What a wonderful man. But these are the evidence. These are the surgeons that have come out. Another surgeon came out in 2006 sharing how he witnessed, under guard of the Chinese army, ladies and gentlemen, between 5,000 and 7,000 Falun Gong practitioners shipped in sealed freight containers hooked up to the railway, the rail lines, and cattle car with handcuffs like rotisserie chickens, being shipped and carted from one labor camp system to death camps to hospitals to have their organs harvested. And this has been going on for 19 years. All the evidence that's been coming out since 2006, 2009, 2013, and just done a recent update in 2016 at the Joint Subcommittee hearing in the United States, in Washington, and still nothing. Now you can hear my frustration because I have also been involved with this for 17 years, and regardless, four different presidents have gone by: Bush, Clinton, Obama, and now Trump, and still silent. But at least Trump signed into law on January 1st, 2018, that he's going to go after pedophiles and he's going to go after human trafficking victims, and he mentioned Falun Gong. And we also had a rally in Washington, D.C. in June, around June 22nd. And as heaven would have it, while we were doing the rally down Washington and around the White House, about how evil communism is and how the persecution of Falun Gong must be stopped and how forced organ harvesting in China has to be exposed and be brought to light, we noticed that there was the motorcade of Trump. So Trump literally witnessed the whole thing, but nothing has yet been said. But they all know, the Justice Department, the State Department, the House of Representatives has unanimously signed into law resolutions for the last 19 years to urge the communist regime to stop persecuting Falun Gong. So God bless the United States. God bless Canada. God bless Israel for signing into law that it is illegal for any of their citizens to go to China to get organ tourism, transplant. And
really understand sometimes what a terrible burden it is to know some of the things that I know.
Yes, Mitchell, we're going into another let's pick that up on.
This is The Micro Effect. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and today my guest on the show is Nicholas Gerber, and Mitchell's been telling us a great deal about what's been happening to the Falun Gong in China, in communist China. Before we get back to our discussion, I want to mention again, please support this radio network, your financial support is absolutely essential so that we can get great programs and great guests like this and really get this word out all over North America. We are in the process now of a fundraising effort to get a satellite uplink that would allow us to transmit this program all over North America. It's important that we get this project accomplished, and so anything that you can do, be $5 a month, any kind of commitment that you want to make will help this cause. The other thing I want to mention is that Debbie Boscalupi's Radioactive Wednesday will be on tomorrow morning at the same time as our Connecting the Dots program, and she will be talking about property rights and more specifically about smart meters and what's happening in Northern California with the smart meters that are being put in place to control everything we do on the electrical grid and really control everything we do. So please join her for that program. Also, it's important you join Jeff Bennett after my show today, and really Tuesday through Friday, Jeff Bennett's Life, Liberty, and all that jazz. He does a great program as well. So with that, Mitchell, I'm sorry we had to cut you off. You know how it is to pay bills, but I do want to give you the opportunity to finish your thought on how this whole system has been, let's say, perpetrated and then supported by the communist system.
Well, you know, there was a saying in an old saying, and it goes something like this, that there have been many empires that have, in history, that have killed in order to conquer. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has conquered in order to kill. And any group that it targets would not stand a chance. Within 3 days, it would be completely crushed. However, with the Falun Gong, it has stood the test of time within 19 years and still going strong to this day. The courageousness is admirable. The reign of terror that has just fallen upon the Falun Gong for the last 19 years it will soul stir the human world. If it hasn't soul stirred or shocked you, ladies and gentlemen, it really will. It still makes me feel shocked after 19 years, because a good person will resist an evil system with his or her soul. And a cold genocide versus a hot genocide. There's a recent article that came out on July 20th, 2018, that mentioned that a cold genocide as opposed to a hot genocide, which occurs with a short, furious intensity, and that Falun Gong is a form of cold genocide, citing other academics who describe cold genocide as a slow-motion genocide or genocide by attrition, in contrast with a hot genocide, which highlights the immediate unleashing of violent death. A cold genocide, which is occurring with Falun Gong in China, recognizes subtler forms of structural violence, which eventually lead to the annihilation of the targeted group. And the communist regime has kept them alive in order to harvest their organs and plasticize and embalm their bodies to make a multi-billion-dollar profiteering industrialized organ harvesting trade going on for the last 19 years in China. And I tell you, this is monumental. And one thing I'll also share with you before I forget, in 1999, 1 month before the persecution and complete crackdown of Falun Gong commencing in China, a Gestapo-type Chinese stormtrooper office was created called the 610 office. And this 610 office, 1 month before the persecution or the final solution to the Falun Gong commenced, sits or has sat for all these years on top of the party system that controls the government system. and has one instruction and one instruction only, to destroy Falun Gong and wipe it and eradicate it from China. Basically declare war on the Falun Gong economically, socially, and politically. And this entity, this evil entity that has been formed by the Chinese Communist Party, that has controlled China, the Chinese government, and the Chinese people for 50 years of the last 50 years, sits on top of the communist regime and controls all economic, social, and political spectrums. Now think about it. It's like a Nazi-style-esque genocide, a Gestapo-type agency. And China has the largest military, the largest population, and the largest economy, all controlled by the Chinese communist regime and all controlled by the 610 office that sits on top of the communist regime on China, targeting and formed to eradicate and destroy Falun Gong. If that doesn't make you think, I don't know what will.
Well, you know what makes me almost as sick as that, Mitchell, is the fact that our mainstream media and our political leadership has been so silent on this genocide, on this absolute travesty that's going on, and the fact that they have been so mute in trying to get this information before the world as well as the American people.
Absolutely, Dan, and that's why I take my hat off to you, dear sir, for being a hero and for being courageous. And for your listeners, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you, you don't know me, I don't know you, but just for sitting with me today, out of your busy schedules, you all have families, you all have, God knows what's going on. I mean, it's such a crazy, hectic life nowadays, and life and time is moving so fast, and we all have jobs, and we all have things to do. For you to sit by me today and listen with your ears and allow me to reach into your hearts and really share with you about the truth about Falun Gong and what is going on in China, and have you listen to the investigators and Anastasia Lin and myself. God bless you. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. And the way you can help is through discernment. No, we cannot invade China or bomb China. But there are other ways. The most important way, I believe, is discernment. Read the evidence. Maybe buy the books from David Kilgour and David Mathis and Ethan Gutmann. David Mathis and David Kilgour's book is Bloody Harvest. You can look online. Ethan Gutmann's book, The Slaughter. You can go to the website. Our website is stoporganharvesting.org. There's also endtransplantabuse.org. Also, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, DAFOH.org. Sign a petition. I know people think, well, what is a petition going to do? We're going to do much more than that, Mitch. I get it, but think about it. What do you sign your name to? People just don't sign their names to anything. Your will, your check, a mortgage. You've got to be absolutely sure you're signing it for some good reason, because the pen is always mightier than the sword. Shakespeare said that, I believe. So the signature verifies that you are supporting something that is good and that should not be persecuted, and therefore positioning yourself on the right side of destiny. So these are the kind of things that you can do. And I am grateful that I can come on your show. Another thing you can do, Dan, or people who are listening, if there's anyone out there in the industry in terms of radio talk shows, if there are reporters listening or other radio talk show hosts that are listening, or CEOs or professors that have an ethics class at a university of 300 students and are doing something on China, allow me to grace your talk show. Allow me to grace your studio. Allow me to grace your classroom through Skype, like I am with Dan right now. Because the more people that get to understand about Falun Gong, that it is a dignified practice, that it shouldn't be persecuted, and the forced organ harvesting is abhorrent and an abomination, the better our world will be, because it affects everybody, or every one of us, Dan. It's like, you know what, even though they're Chinese and Falun Gong, people might think, well, what has it got to do with me? I'm a Western person. I live in America. I've got all this going on. Do I have to really care about what's going on in China? Why should I care? Because you all bleed the same blood. You breathe the same air. And imagine if it was your family members, your loved ones, your friends, your colleagues, or even yourself that was shipped out, forcefully blood tested, thrown into a hospital van, organs then cut out of your body, and your body was just burned in the ovens or sold off as a plastinized body to a body exhibition, and your organs sold as the healthiest organs in the world illegally without consent. What would you do? And that is why, think about it, it concerns us all as human beings.
Well, Mitchell, part of the problem that I see with this whole movement, the fact that this has happened, is because China is now America's #1 trading partner. We are literally doing business with some of the bloodiest hands in the world. And the fact that average Americans don't seem to care. I mean, if there's a great way that we could protest against the attacks against the Falun Gong, certainly the fact that we should make Chinese products, because on top of everything else, a lot of those products are made with prison or slave labor. And so, this transcends anything that we would consider really Americanism, because we're allowing this stuff to happen, and we're actually helping to pay for this, and it's crazy.
Absolutely. I would love to share with you another clip, if I may, from Dr. Wendy Rogers out of Australia, and she's a director of psychology in Australia. I think she's a deputy director of clinical ethics and psychology, and I think it will be really, really good for the audience to hear her clip about the evidence that has been presented by Ethan Gutmann and David Kilgour, as well as what Falun Gong represents, and from an independent party as well.
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
Okay, here we go.
What seems to be unusual about China is that, and I think Ethan Gutmann makes this argument brilliantly in his book, is how the Chinese government has solved two problems at once. They've solved a problem of organ shortage along with a problem of dealing with a quite annoying dissident population by using the one to source the other. And it's done on such a wide level, with involvement at all levels of government, that it's state-sanctioned. It's turned, what Ethan says, it's turned doctors into murderers, and used health reasons to persecute and kill a group that they're not happy with. It's extremely difficult to find evidence about what's happening in China because it is such a secretive system. At the moment, however, though, we've got 3 reports that have come out over a period of 10 years. The first in 2006, Bloody Harvest, by David Kilgour and David Mattis, used a wide range of evidence and particularly relied on phone calls and interviews and website scrutiny to look at what was going on in China to establish the nature of the trade there. Then Ethan Gutmann did his investigation called The Slaughter, which was published in 2014. And he used a different methodology. He interviewed people who had come out of labour camps and put together a very detailed picture, which he fitted into the political background of China, and built up a very compelling story of how the two things had come together, the persecution of the Falun Gong and the rise in transplant medicine. So that was 2 sources of evidence. Following that, in 2016, we've had a new report published called The Update, with Bloody Harvest, The Slaughter, The Update, which is available free to download. And this is an exhaustive report, 600 pages with 2,000 references. And in this report, the authors who joined forces, so we've got Mattis, Gutmann and Kilgour, have tried to document the extent of transplant activity in China using a number of innovative methods. So they've looked at the number of hospitals that are licensed to do transplants. the number of hospitals that are not licensed but are nonetheless doing transplants, the number of beds in the hospitals, the number of medical staff in the hospitals, reports of how busy the doctors are, reports of bed utilisation rates, and reports of profits being made by transplant in individual hospitals. In terms of withholding credibility from practitioners of Falun Gong just because they're practitioners of Falun Gong, it's an instance of what we call testimonial injustice. It's like not believing someone because of who they are rather than because of what they say and the reasons that what they say might be true. And again, I put it down to the skill of the Chinese government in demonizing the practitioners of Falun Gong within China, so that they're, as I understand, can be ostracized or considered to be bad citizens, bad people, and so you shouldn't believe anything they say. But they've also sold that to people who should be able to take a far more critical stance, who haven't been subject to years of Chinese brainwashing, and who should be able to say, okay, it doesn't really matter what this person's spiritual practices are. They're providing me with evidence, and I should listen to this evidence and take it at face value initially. Of course, you're sceptical if you think someone's trying to tell a story to further some political ends. But again, as Ethan's explained, there's no evidence that Falun Gong is a cult of any sort. There's no evidence of political action to try and bring down the Chinese government. There's no evidence of anything other than a deep desire to be left alone to practice their spiritual beliefs in peace and to not be locked up and murdered. And so it seems a very unpleasant and evil form of victim blaming to withhold credibility just because people are practitioners.
And that was Professor Randy Rogers being interviewed.
Well, Mitchell, something that comes out of all this is the fact that, again, we've talked about this before a couple of times, but the fact that everybody is so silent about it. And I think that is really important that we turn that around. So what I'm going to suggest to you, we've got a project called the Red Pill University that's part of Freedom Force International, and I will be connecting you with the faculty and the people that are organizing that. I think you would have a very important place as a faculty member and actually have you put together the information for a curriculum to expose some of this. I think that would be really important. I also want to connect you with as many people as I can in radio and talking about how important this is so that you get as much exposure as humanly possible, because your message is incredibly important to the world. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about what average Americans, I know you mentioned this earlier, but I want you to have an opportunity to talk about the various sites that people should go to, the information that people should be gleaning, and how average Americans can support you in your effort to get this information to the world.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, to fail to support the good and to fail to expose evil is truly unacceptable. And what is a man or what is a woman who cannot make the world a better place? To contribute something, a signature, a second, a moment, a minute, an hour to learning about something that is truthful, and to go to the websites like stoporganharvesting.org, endtransplantabuse.org. You can look up online the Kilgour Mattis report, forced organ harvesting in China, learn the Falun Gong exercises, because the Falun Gong exercises are beautiful. Those who are interested in yoga or Tai Chi, who have always wanted to be intrigued by learning something like Falun Gong, go and try it in a local park. The local contacts are there. The website for this is for the exercises are www.falundafa.org. Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong, it's the same name, so please don't get confused. It's the same name, it's a different name, but the same practice. And all the exercises are free of charge. I think people that should experience Falun Gong or Falun Dafa and see how beautiful these exercises are, so peaceful and how relaxing they are, and how kind the people who practice as well. This is not a demonized cult as the communist regime says it is. And the propaganda, the weaponized propaganda against it, is all dying out. All the poison is being, cut out. Just like when a snake bites you, you go to the hospital, the venom gets taken out and gets discarded. That's the communist regime's propaganda. That's the communist regime's smoke and mirrors and deception. It's all being filtered out. It's all being exposed, and they can no longer, and they will no longer, and they have not much time left to truly cover this up to the world. And Dan, I think that's a wonderful opportunity to be a faculty member. I'd love to share about what's going on in China. I think more people, more students, particularly in the liberal universities, need to wake up and realize what is going on and how they are being indoctrinated by a communist-style system. And I take my hat off to the American patriots and the American people and those who hold the flag high and hold and salute the flag and to pledge an allegiance to the United States of America, because I do, for which it stands, one nation under God. And I can tell you right now, I'm an American citizen, and I am so grateful to be part of the American Republic, to be a part of the American Constitution, and to be a part of the American civilization that has given its blood, sweat, and tears. Its daughters, its sons have given blood, sweat, and tears. So, again, I wanted to just say thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting me. And all I ask, the biggest support is the awareness and to uphold the dignity of the spiritual movement, namely Falun Gong, and to learn about what's going on and to spread the awareness as best as you can. So, Dan, with that, I appreciate everything, and God bless, and thank you so much. And God bless America, and God bless the American spirit.
Well, thank you, Mitchell, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I will be in contact with you about doing future programs as well, because I think what you're doing is incredibly important to the United States and to the world.
Thank you, Dan. We'll talk soon again. Thank you, everybody. Good night. God bless, and take care of yourselves.
Take a journey with me deep inside the rabbit hole. Wake up, my friends, there's some things that you have to know. Everything you ever thought you knew, it has to go.